Welcome to the Dr. Warren Gage podcast. Who is the beast in Revelation? What is the significance of the number 666? Throughout history, there has been enormous fear and speculation surrounding these two questions. But what does the Bible actually have to say about them? In this lesson, Dr. Warren Gage gives you the biblical answer, and it's an encouraging message for everyone who believes in Jesus Christ.
I want to make a short comment about the number of the beast. It's taken on an outsized importance. The key identification, the key to the whole book, is the identification of Lady Babylon. But there are other identifications that seem to fascinate people, and perhaps justly. One of them is the number of the beast and the mark of the beast and all of that. The beast, his identification, there's a clue to the beast's identification in the interrelationship between John's Gospel and Revelation that are corresponded by different patterns. And two things are said about the beast in Revelation. One is that he wants to control buying and selling, and the other is that he is going into perdition. And those same two expressions describe a particular character in the Gospel of John. And perhaps that's not surprising. It's Judas. Judas wants to control selling in the account of the honor that Mary of Bethany shows to Jesus when she breaks the vessel of spikenard that was incredibly valuable. And Judas is angry and scolds her for this gesture, this extravagant gesture of love, and comments that the oil could have been sold and put to a better use. He says, and given to the poor. And he was the treasurer, so he's the most trusted, which tells us something about the beast. He's not one anyone would have any suspicion about, but he is a traitor, and he was a thief because he had his hand in the bag. He was the treasurer, which means he was the most trusted. He was the only Judean, and so he had the place of greatest honor, but he wanted to control buying and selling. He wanted to control selling. He had the bag. He was the treasurer. In the Last Supper, Jesus commands him to leave. What you do quickly is a command for him to leave. He's not to partake of the Eucharist table. And so he leaves. John comments that he goes into the city at night, and it's Jerusalem in its darkness. He leaves the light of the world and goes into the street of Jerusalem, and it's night. So John sees a sign in that. He's turned his back on the light of the world and has given himself over to the powers of darkness to be about his work. Now, when he leaves, however, he's leaving at not the normal time that somebody would leave that supper. And so the disciples draw two inferences to explain why he left. One inference that John tells us is about that they assumed that he left in order to give some alms to the poor. That's significant because Jesus apparently would regularly command him to give some offering to the poor. And so that was their assumption that he had done that. That's even more striking if they assumed that he would do that because the table for the Last Supper was very poorly appointed. The other inference that they draw is that he went to buy something to help to supply this very meager sacred Passover supper. Apparently it was just very poor. Although ironically it was the richest table ever, but it was very poorly appointed. So Judas went out into the city to buy something to help to supply the emptiness of that table. And so there you have him wanting to buy, or assumed to be buying, bread for the table, and wanting to sell Mary of Bethany's gesture of love, the oil that was valued so much, 300 pieces of silver. In his mind, Jesus is worth selling for a tithe of that, 30 pieces of silver. So anyway, that shows you the character of the man. And of Judas too, it is said in the gospel that he is going to perdition, the son of perdition. So the inference from all of that is that the beast will be characterized as someone in the community who is highly trusted, but not worthy of that trust. He's a secret unbeliever and serving himself at the detriment of everyone else. And when he reveals himself, his characteristic is that of a beast and not even of a man. So I think that all the major characters in the gospel reappear in Revelation, and Lady Babylon herself will reappear. She has several predecessors in the gospel that you put them all together, and the three women in the gospel, and they constitute a picture of Lady Babylon. So that's the nature of the character there. Now, about the number itself, the number is 666. Some manuscripts have 616, and I haven't looked at that textually, or in a better method, I think, is rather than relying on ancient manuscripts, to look at it literarily in terms of the criticism to determine which is predominant. But it seems that the preferred reading, the one that is indicated, is 666, and if that's the case, then I think it's it's highly suggestive of the character of the man and his destiny. 666, if that's the case, it's a repeating decimal. It's 6 divided by 9, and that would create that fraction, but it repeats itself. It repeats itself as far as you can trace it within space and time. And so it's always increasing, although incrementally. It's decreasing, but incrementally increasing. And it goes all the way. You can represent it mathematically in the relationship between a curve and the line. It's called an asymptote, so that you have, like on the Cartesian plane, you've got the x and y axis. If the y-axis is the asymptote that extends in finite time and space, the curve comes in and approaches at the xy axis. It comes in and approaches the asymptote, the axis, and it continues on forever, always getting closer, but never intersecting with the asymptote and within a known finite space and time. It gets closer, but it never quite makes it. It's striving, but it never makes it mathematically. You carry it on out, it's always getting closer to the asymptote and never intersecting with it. And I think that becomes mathematically a metaphor for the intersection between the infinite and the finite. And they never quite can come together. In the Bible, 7 is the number associated with God. God creates the world and everything there is in 7 days, and it's perfect, it's complete. And so that number is uniquely reserved for God. And so what happens is the number of man in the Bible is 6. He's created on the 6th day, and 6 seems to have a relationship to the nature of man. And he's created in the image of God, but he is not like God. But the 666, always increasing, would seem to represent the heart of man that wants to be perfect 7. He wants to be divine, but he is never, ever going to be able to accomplish that. He will always be, even if he increases, he will always be short of 7. He will never, a finite creature can never approach the infinite. He can approach it, but he can never cross the infinite, can never cross that line. And so it's going on. The 666 actually goes on forever, and it's always more the further out you get, but it's never, ever going to make it to 7. And so the significance of that, it seems to me, is that that number represents the fallen angel, Satan. It represents the fallen man. He wants to be like God, and he's always more, but that teases him, it taunts him rather than gives him any sense of progress. And so every increase, the further out you go, as he's becoming more like God, but can never reach 7, is frustrating him. And so hell is going to be that constant sense of frustration. It's always more, but instead of receiving that more in gratitude, it receives it in resentment and anger and frustration. And so that becomes the hell that's in the mind of the unredeemed, whether angels or men. On the contrary of that is that it speaks of the sanctification work that continues throughout heaven to me. It seems like the number of man is always 666. And even in the redeemed state, we have that same asymptotic relationship with Christ. We are attracted to him, and we are always increasing to become more like him, but we will never exhaust him. And that seems to me to just bespeak the beauty and the glory of heaven, because we will always be more like him, belonging to him, because we belong to the asymptote. Christ is the asymptote. We're more like him, but we never exhaust him. So we're imaging creatures. We will become more like God, but we will never become divine. And yet, we receive that not with frustration, but as we grow in grace throughout all of eternity, we will become more like Christ, and we will be grateful for every approximate increase. However it goes throughout all of eternity, it means the ones that are redeemed will be grateful and rejoicing, will be more splendorous in our beauty because we're becoming more like him, reflecting more of him. He becomes more attractive to us, we become more attractive to him, and that goes on forever. It's a dynamic state, it's not a static one, so that means the joy of the believer will be increasing forever without ever exhausting him. It's never static, it's never stable. It's always increasing, and then we will be like our Lord. As we reflect more of his beauty, we become more beauteous to him, and that attraction continues and increases forever because he's the divine human man. And so it's that intersection of divinity and finiteness and infiniteness. It seems like that seems to have something of the character of heaven. The ancients, in the context into which all of this was written, it was the Hellenistic world. And when the Hellenes thought about hell, they didn't think about it so much as with a Dantesque imagery of fire. They thought about it, and that's also the Lord describes it. The fire is not quenched. It wasn't so much fire, but it was a place of ever-increasing, tantalizing frustration. And so they would describe the Titans, who were kept in adamantine chains because they were gods, they were immortal, and so they had to be bound, and so they were bound up forever without any hope of release. And Tantalus is one of the Titans, and he was up to his waist in this beautiful, beautiful crystal clear water in one of the rivers of Hades. He's standing in the river. And above him are these trees. The boughs are laden with gorgeous, beautiful, luscious fruit. And the water is just below him. But he's bound in chains, and every time he bows down to take a drink from that beautiful crystal water, the water recedes out of his reach. And when he becomes hungry and he wants to partake of the fruit that's above him, he reaches up with his mouth to try to get a bite from one of those fruit, and the boughs rise up, and so they're out of his reach. And so he's constantly consumed with thirst and hunger, but he can never satisfy himself. That's a vision of hell. I think it's a very clear vision of hell, a place where there is no quenching of thirst and no satisfaction of hunger. Another illustration was Sisyphus, whose job was to roll a big stone up a steep hill. And as soon as he reaches the summit, it rolls over him and rolls back down again, and he has to start his work. And he does it eternally. He's always pushing that stone up the hill, and it's always rolling down in front of him. And so there we have the labor that is strenuous and constant, but never, and there's never any relief from it, and there's never any end to it. And those aspects, I think, too, would inform hell, because The wicked, although they would be granted more because their number too is 666, the increase would always frustrate them and defy them, and then leave them unsatisfied. Whereas the believer, throughout all of eternity, will be given more, but receive all of that likeness to Jesus as a gift and a grace in thankfulness, and seeing that their labor in Christ is not in vain. And so the opposite to the hellish vision of the Hellenes would be something like heaven, it seems like to me. So that the number of man, the 666, it's always wanting to be more and always given more, but the attitude is entirely different. In frustration, we would never be divine, and if that frustrates us, then we're probably not of the redeemed. But if that's something that excites us, that we can see that heaven is not static, but its vision is always and ever increasing in likeness to the Lord, what a treasure that would be, and what a joy that would go on indefinitely throughout all finite time and space, never intersecting, but that would mean never exhausting the perfections of Christ, always aspiring to be more like him and always becoming more like him, but never transgressing that boundary between a creature and the Creator, so that we would, but instead of responding in frustration and a sense of vanity, it would be one of gratefulness and delight, ever increasing delight, so that heaven becomes something exciting in always growing, instead of some vision that's dark. That seems to me to make the most sense in terms of how mathematically I think that would be understood, and figuratively that would be understood in the Hellenistic world, into which the New Testament was written.
Thank you for listening to the Dr. Warren Gage podcast. If you enjoyed this message, please be sure to like and subscribe to one of our channels so that you never miss an episode. We'd appreciate it if you could also leave us a review. You can find us on drwarrengage.com, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. To support the podcast and gain access to exclusive offers and content from Dr. Warren Gage, please visit our Patreon account at patreon.com/Dr. Warren Gage. We hope you join us next time on the Dr. Warren Gage podcast.